Proust memorably said that the real act of discovery consists not in finding new lands, but in seeing with new eyes. And that is what we aim to do, primarily, although we would argue that recent discoveries in neuroscience may also offer us the opportunity to find new lands, of which more later. We're going to look at the experience of engaging with arts and culture with new eyes and propose what it is about that experience that might help us rethink our future. Fueled by that understanding, we're then going to go on to discover what works in terms of our mighty purpose and why, and if we're successful, and I believe we will be, our work will help the people who still make the big decisions to make better decisions by understanding the integral role of art and culture in the great transition that lies ahead. Dennis Dutton, in his book, The Art Instinct, reminds us that the arts are an abundant resource. Like language, they emerge spontaneously and universally in similar forms across cultures, employing imaginative and intellectual capacities that he believes had clear survival value in prehistory. I'd like to conjure that our work might contribute to how they have a clear survival value going forward too. With that ubiquity comes universality in what we all experience through art and culture as well. Most of us, whichever part of the world we come from, can point to art and cultural experiences that brought us together with others in a shared imaginative experience, shaped our understanding of history and our place in the world, caused disruption and challenged power, helped us understand what others were feeling, created spaces for new ideas and opportunities to flourish, and provided emotional and spiritual value. Lucy Neal and Hilary Jennings, authors of a major report for us last year on how cultural and creative practitioners in the UK were already responding to resource scarcity and climate change, wrote, "The arts have a tradition of speaking differently and nurturing cultural change. Drawing on metaphor and abstraction, the arts tap deeply into intrinsic values of connection, story, place, and meaning. There is a sense that science cannot play the role of interpreting the challenges we face, they say, or questioning what values underpin the need for change. The arts, however, have just such an ability to challenge the status quo, create emergent spaces for new ideas, and engage people collectively at an imaginative level." Dutton's view is that imaginative experience is arguably the most important of art and culture's attributes. By allowing us to confront the world not just as naive realists who respond directly to immediate threats and opportunities, the general condition of other animals, he says, but as supposition makers and thought experiments, imagination gave human beings one of their greatest evolved cognitive assets. But we need to do much more to distill the nature of this cognitive asset, the practices and processes that build it, and their particular capacity to affect our response to the challenges we face. And the first stage of the Rethink programme will do exactly that. Looking back into the past, it feels almost as if there have been as many views about the nature of this cognitive asset as there are grains of sand upon a beach. The idea that art and culture have transformative power in a range of areas, psychological well-being, health, moral education and behaviour, educational development, political and social empowerment and emancipation, the forging of individual and group identity, goes back 2,500 years, accompanied across those millennia by swinging pendulum of views around their capacity to effect positive change. But there are patterns in the sand of history, some of which are clearer than others, and some of which are of especial relevance to our mighty purpose. The capacity of art and culture to develop empathy, cooperation, and social solidarity is one pattern we aim to drill further down into. The power of stories to experiment with the question, what if? To offer richly instructive sources of factual information and encourage us to explore the points of view, beliefs, motivations, and values of other human minds, inculcating potentially adaptive interpersonal and social capacities, is another. The ability to challenge power and disrupt the status quo and politically awaken is another. The environmentalist Bill McGibbon views artists as the antibodies of the cultural bloodstream. Artists, he says, sense trouble early and rally to isolate, expose, and defeat it, to bring to bear the human power for love and beauty and meaning against the worst results of carelessness and greed and stupidity. So when art, both of great worth and in great quantities, begins to cluster around an issue, it means that civilization has identified it, finally, as a threat. It may also be that new knowledge about the nature of this cognitive asset, for example, that being discovered by neuroscientists, offers up new patterns for us to understand and deploy in the service of our goal too. V.S. Ramachandran, who recently published a book called This Is Your Brain on Art, believes that our knowledge of human vision and of the brain is now so sophisticated that we can speculate intelligently on the neural basis of art and maybe begin to construct a scientific theory of artistic experience. Semir Zeki, Professor of Neuroaesthetics at University College London, believes that the artist is in a sense a neuroscientist, exploring the potentials and capacities of the brain, though with different tools. How such creations can arouse aesthetic experiences can only be fully understood in neural terms, he believes. Such an understanding is now well within our reach. So it's a better understanding of these patterns that will help us to then move on and work out what works and why, to propose what it is exactly about this cognitive asset that could help transform the values of our society and economy, and how it can be better nurtured, and given the urgency of the situation we face, how that can be achieved quickly and effectively. The importance of engaging with our cultural values in order to respond to the bigger-than-self problems we face is a discourse that some of you may know that is being developed by a group of major NGOs, World Wildlife Fund UK, Climate Outreach and Information Network, Campaign to Protect Rural England, Friends of the Earth and Oxfam, under the banner of Common Cause. A group that, given the congruence of our direction of travel, we are preparing to work with on the Rethink programme. In a groundbreaking report published last year, they expressed the view that whatever the recent successes of civil society organisations in helping to address bigger-than-self challenges, it seems that the current responses are incommensurate with the scale of the problems that we confront. It is increasingly evident that resistance to action on these challenges will only be overcome through engagement with cultural values that underpin this resistance. It also seems clear that in trying to meet these challenges, civil society organisations must champion some long-held but insufficiently esteemed values while seeking to diminish the primacy of many values which are now prominent, at least in Western industrialised society. The values that must be strengthened, values that are commonly held and which can be brought to the fore, include empathy towards those who are facing the effects of humanitarian and environmental crises, concern for future generations, and recognition that human prosperity resides in relationships, both with one another and the natural world. Undoubtedly, these are values that have been weakened and often derided in modern culture. MMM's view is that these values and behaviours can be best nurtured through three concepts: ways of thinking and being which we believe will be core to our success in creating a livable world; well-being, a fulfilling and happy life for individuals and communities; democracy, the capacity of groups of people to take shared decisions about their future at work, at home, and in other places of everyday life; sustainable livelihoods, a means of living where the capabilities, assets, including both material and social resources, and activities required, are sustainable. And it is these three concepts that form the main architecture for our Rethink programme. You can go onto the Rethink website and search a nascent seed bank of projects that are illustrating how working with art and culture and these three concepts are already contributing to making the world more livable. And here are just a few examples. The Parisian photographer J.R., whose eyes I put up earlier, his work combines art and action and deals with commitment, freedom, identity, and limits. His what he calls pervasive art spreads uninvited on the buildings of the slums around Paris, on the walls in the Middle East, on the broken bridges in Africa, or the favelas of Brazil. His 2007 face-to-face project tried to show that beyond what separates them, Israelis and Palestinians are enough alike to be able to understand one another. Israeli and Palestinian men and women who have the same jobs accepted to laugh or cry, to scream or pull faces in front of JR's lens. The portraits created were pasted up face to face in monumental format on either side of the separation wall and in several surrounding towns. The Museums of the Future toolkit has just been published, written and produced by Flow Associates. The key message of the toolkit is that being a truly sustainable museum isn't just about having low-energy lighting. It's about museums striving to transform themselves and the lives of their visitors, schools and communities in order to have a wider impact on the planet. The aim is to help museums sustain their own organisation as well as local people by pioneering the use of sustainable materials, protecting or growing green spaces for wildlife, becoming a base for local food knowledge and heritage, or starting a movement for collaborative consumption, helping communities share their possessions, skills and time. It shows how museums are the perfect basis for such work, because most collections represent the different ways that humans have grown, exploited, invented, recycled, and disposed of materials in ways that are both damaging or healing to the environment. And these collections can lead to an exploration of sustainable ways that we can use materials differently for a better future. This time last year, the Tooting Trash Catchers Carnival brought traffic on Tooting High Street to a stop. As someone involved in closing Upper Street in order to set the town hall on fire as part of the Islington International Festival in the mid-90s, I know that this was no mean feat. Over 800 participants from local schools, community groups and clubs took part in this unique carnival made almost entirely from household rubbish. Thousands of plastic bottles and shopping bags, 500,000 crisp packets, 1/2 ton of renewable willow and 1/2 ton of material were collected over a 6-month period to create this extravaganza. And the central message of the carnival was that even in a large urban town such as Tooting, we can take steps to overcome our oil dependence and our waste problems by going back to our roots, slowing down and taking a fresh look at how we consume food and goods. Ai Weiwei's sunflower seeds, the Tate Turbine Halls commission last year, made up of millions of small pieces of handcrafted porcelain, each apparently identical but actually unique, invited us to look more closely at the Made in China phenomenon and the geopolitics of cultural and economic exchange today. The work posed challenging questions. What does it mean to be an individual in today's society? Are we insignificant or powerless unless we act together? What do our increasing desires, materialism and number mean for society, the environment and the future? Our aim over the next 2 to 3 years is to connect all those working with art and culture to make the world more livable so effectively that the numbers of seeds in our seed bank grow to become perhaps as numerous as those in Ai Weiwei's installation. We will encourage their proliferation in 3 ways: through an international commissioning fund, a dynamic community of practice collaborating across the world on a series of projects, and a set of policy provocations of such a reasoned and evidenced nature that decision makers in politics, economics and the environment will be compelled to think differently. Here are 2 examples of projects in development that we think could contribute to that proliferation. Firstly, working with the Common Cause Group, we aim to develop new knowledge about whether, and if so how, engagement with art and culture activates and enhances the likelihood that people can behave in ways that express intrinsic values for self-acceptance, affiliation, and community feeling. We've begun to lay the foundation for developing our methodological approach, aiming to answer 4 key questions. What are the effects of active participation and engagement with cultural activity in values development? What is the effect of deliberate reflection in values development? How can these effects be sustained over time, and how do these effects compare with other transformative experiences? Secondly, working with the New Economics Foundation, we will argue and explain art and culture's powerful role in the transition to steady state or ecological economics. We believe art and culture's potential to contribute to the hard outcomes a new macroeconomic model will need to deliver is 2-fold. First is its capacity to grow the cultural vitality of our communities, with the benefits this brings in terms of health and well-being. And secondly is the potential to offer diverse routes to sustainable livelihoods that are largely dematerialised and therefore don't cost the earth. Through this project, which we're launching at the Edinburgh Festival in August, we aim to shift the frame through which art and culture is viewed in terms of the economy. We will generate data and insight that helps us move away from the prevailing view, which privileges and rewards activity that generates high growth and increased GDP, and towards a new view, which illustrates art and culture's role in delivering environmental sustainability, equitable economic justice, and high levels of human well-being. As the futurist John Shaw has said, the future is not some place we're going, but one we are creating. The paths are not to be found, but made, and the activity of making them changes both the maker and the destinations. So as I explained at the beginning, our plans for Rethink are just getting underway, our programme is highly ambitious, and there is a lot of heavy lifting and hard work to do if we are to realise our mighty purpose. Realise the potential of art and culture to help us tackle the very serious global challenges we face so that we can make that leap to a livable world. Shifting people's worldview and creating a new system of influence, for that is the task in hand, is probably about the hardest thing you could wish to get involved in. But we are beginning to understand how large-scale change happens. Leaders in the field like Margaret Wheatley teach us it begins with small, local actions. It emerges from connections among these local efforts, from the exchanges of learning and the forging of relationships. It is locally that we learn how to be the change we want to see in the world. It then goes through a life cycle, starting with networking, connecting people who are often so busily engaged in their own efforts they have no idea what's happening outside their immediate locality. It moves on to a second stage where people realise that they can create more benefit by working together. Relationships shift from casual exchanges to a commitment to work together in some way. Personal needs expand to include a desire to support others and improve professional practices. Communities of practice provide a powerful means to do this. In such a group, there is an intentional commitment to advance the field of practice and to share those discoveries with a wider audience. Communities of practice make their resources and knowledge available to anyone, especially those doing related work. And the third stage can never be predicted. It is the sudden appearance of a system that has real power and influence. Pioneering efforts that hovered at the periphery suddenly become the norm. The practices developed by courageous communities become the accepted standard. People no longer hesitate about adopting these approaches and methods, and they learn them easily. Policy and funding debates now include the perspectives and experiences of these pioneers. Given that the occasion is most certainly piled high with difficulty, as Abraham Lincoln famously said all those years ago, there feels to all of us involved in Rethink to be no choice except to get involved in this hardest of tasks. Business as usual is not an option. We do not want to be listening anymore to the story of what Joanna Macy has called the Great Unravelling. We want to be telling the story of what she describes as the Great Turning, the epochal transition from an industrial growth society to a life-sustaining civilization that we know we need to make. Rethinking the power of art and culture in helping us get there is the task that MMM has set itself, and we hope that many of you will want to join us on that journey. For as Margaret Wheatley says, the world doesn't change one person at a time. It changes as networks of relationships form among people who discover they share a common cause and a vision of what is possible. Thank you.